Welcome to Lead Pods, the official leadership podcast from USMB for pastors and church leaders, where our goal is to increase our impact together.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Lead Pods. This is episode number 78, and we're talking about a very important topic with my special guest, Robert Carlton. So regardless of your current age or health condition, all of us need to be mindful of some of these end-of-life conversations that will happen to all of us, both for ourselves, for our parents, how that will relate to our children. For some reason, I think especially in America, we just struggle talking about death and how to handle end-of-life issues. It's just awkward. A lot of us feel like we're not really prepared, but it's one of those things that we're all going to face, and we need to do that well. And that's why I'm so grateful for today's guest, Robert Carlton. Robert is retired now, but he spent many years working in the healthcare, end-of-life, senior services arena, and he just has a lot of really helpful information to share with us today. And really, the gist of it is, Robert shares a lot of details that are important for all of us, but really, it's responsible, it's wise for us to have some kind of awkward conversations up front, maybe just do a little bit of hard work now, so that we're prepared whenever those end-of-life days do come. So again, no matter what age or stage of life you're in, this is important. It's stuff that we all need to wrestle with. And even as church leaders, I think it's wise for us to know some of these details so that we can be prepared to help families and our church families as these things come up. So, important topic, and I'm really grateful that we have a great expert to talk to today. So, after a quick break from a sponsor, we'll get right to my conversation with Robert Carlton.
MB Foundation provides biblical financial stewardship solutions to the Mennonite Brethren community. We encourage stewardship and generosity through the gathering, management, and distribution of financial resources for Christ and His kingdom. Let us assist you in giving meaning to money. Our services include planned giving, loans, fund management, investment certificates, and stewardship education. With offices in Hillsborough, Kansas, and Fresno, California, we are ready to serve you. Learn more at www.mbfoundation.com or call us today at 1-800-551-1547. MB Foundation is pleased to partner with USMB to bring you this episode of Lead Pods.
All right, my friends. Well, today I'm excited to be joined by Robert Carlton, and we've got a topic that is relevant to all of us, whether we want to talk about it or not, we need to. And Robert is just an expert in the field and someone who I've gotten to know just a little bit. I know his heart is really in this. So, Robert, thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, thank you.
Great to have you with us. So, for people who don't know you, I know you live in Hesston and you're connected to MB World, but how can we get to know you? Introduce yourself a little bit.
Well, I have a wife and three children. I have a son in Lenexa, in Kansas City area. I have a daughter in the Northwest Arkansas area. And then I have a son in Florida and family, grandchildren. And so they're all nice places to visit.
Just like Hesston, right?
Not quite.
All right, Robert. Well, you are the former director of the Harvey County Senior Services. You have a lot of experience with hospice and just all that kind of senior services, hospice, end of life, all those kinds of things. You spend a vast majority of your career in that field. So tell us, why is it something that you care so much about?
Well, there was a journey that, of course, went along to coming to this time in my life. And I served in the armed forces. And when I came back to Hesston, I was just doing some odd jobs. And I had a good friend that moved out to the state of Washington. And about 6 months later, he called me and kind of convinced me to move out there. And he said there was a lot of things to do. So I did. And I actually went to college there. And then I ended up working in federal government. And that's what I was doing until I got a phone call from my mother and found out that my father at the age of 58 was diagnosed with a cancer that was not going to be able to be treated. And so I made a decision to move home. And so basically for the next couple of years, we went through the whole medical world of chemotherapy and all these different kinds of things that goes along with that most people are aware of. But back in the early 80s, there just wasn't absolutely no services. And so as a son helping my father, it was really frustrating and difficult to try to navigate everything that we needed to do. But the one good service that they did have, and it was fairly new to the state of Kansas even back then, was hospice. And when it came time for him to use that service, we did. And I just remember all those years ago, just how incredible that was. That service was to be able to help the family and to be able to help my father. And really all we had to do as children is just be by his bedside. So I appreciated that. And I remember when the day he died, the nurse that came, I told them that, hey, if there's anything you ever need, let me know because I'd be glad to help. It just meant that much to me. So about a year later, they asked me to be on the board, and I didn't hesitate. And about 6 years later, the administrator of the home care and hospice was moving on, and I was asked to take that position. And although I loved the particular job I was doing, I went ahead and didn't hesitate to take that position. So I did that for the next 30 years. And then I felt that I had done that long enough. And there was an opening for the director of Harvey County Department on Aging. And that's, of course, services that help people stay in their home. There's all services that can help a person do that. And I did that for 5 years. And then I retired about a year and a half ago.
Well, that's just such a field that obviously we all need those services. But I think a lot of people just don't spend time thinking about it, right? And I think when we do pause to think about it, our minds go to, oh, you got to plan the service. We got to figure out, plots if you're going to do burials. And then there's all the accounts that you need to track down. And I guess from your experience, I'm guessing, would you say it's true that most people just aren't prepared? Do you see that people are just kind of, when something tragic happens, it's even worse for the families when they're not ready, right? Is that part of what you've seen?
That's correct, Matt. It's unfortunate. One of the things that we really don't do here in America, we plan a lot for our financials at the end of life, but we just don't plan on how we want our particular, whatever the health issue might be, what I personally want to happen at the end of life. And we don't usually discuss those things. And we definitely usually don't discuss those with our children. And so it's a real hardship on the children because they just don't know what mom or dad want to happen. So yeah,
Right.
it's a problem.
And I think it's one of those things where as Christians, probably almost everyone listening right now is a Christian, a church leader. We obviously have enormous hope for heaven, right? So on one hand, we have nothing to be afraid of. It's good. It's good. But I think just the uncertainty about death and just especially if something tragic happens, our minds just don't want to think about that, right? So I guess through your personal journey, I don't know, with your parents or any other experience that you've had, how can we kind of help people not be so afraid of these kinds of conversations?
Well, I think I'd like to say it this way. After I retired, I had all these experiences helping families and children and helping people be able to live at home as long as they wanted to. And I wasn't sure about what I was going to do. And one of the things that really concerned me is I had all this knowledge. I always just wanted to help people. And I started talking to Pastor Brad. That's the head of the MB church here in Hesston and JL, which is one of the assistant pastors. And we started to discuss about a mission that we could do in our church, helping children with their families. And that's what we're doing now. So I just wanted to kind of put that in because that's kind of what we're doing here. But you're right. Most people don't want to talk about it in America for whatever reason. And, as a believer, I know where I'm going, but there's always that problem with facing a parent that may be dying of cancer or some other disease that is going to end their life here on earth. And that is difficult. And what's difficult about that is usually the children don't know what their parent wants to happen and how they want to be taken care of. So that's the issues. So ways to do that, of course, is to actually have a conversation as a family. And one of the pamphlets that I use is called The 5 Wishes. And it's a pamphlet that goes through talking about, everyone needs to have a durable power of attorney for healthcare decision making. And that person needs to be a person that you're confident that is going to carry out your wishes. And so this pamphlet just takes you through all these different scenarios and you can always change it as your life progresses.
Mm-hmm.
And so once you have that done, then like I'd have that done, then my next step, of course, would be to make sure that everybody understands what I want. And the best way to
Mm-hmm.
do that is to have, and as you all know, as I have stated, my family's in Florida and Arkansas and in Kansas City, but it's hard to get the family together. But when you do, that's one of the things you need to have everybody in the family aware of. And the reason
Mm-hmm.
for that is, of course, the person that's going to make a decision for me for that healthcare decision, when I'm unable to take care of that myself, I need my sons and my daughter to just support that. And they
Right.
also already know what I want. So that's the best way to do that.
Yeah.
And it does work. I was able to do that with my mother and my father-in-law and my mother-in-law. And they all had kind of difficult situations at the end of life, but all we had to do is follow the instructions and just be children. And I can't tell you just what a gift that is to your children.
Because yeah, when you're grieving, you don't want to have to do all this, right? Like you don't want to do it at all, let alone if you haven't done any preparation. That just makes it that much more difficult to get through. So I think in just a minute, I want to go through maybe some steps you recommend for people to go through, maybe even your 5 wishes. We can talk about that. But one thing I thought might be helpful too is if someone listening, if they're relatively younger, their parents are relatively younger, they're healthy, death isn't necessarily on their front of their mind, right? I'm wondering if you could just kind of tell us what kinds of issues come up that we may not think about. Like what to some people, this might seem so far away and it doesn't seem like it'd be quote unquote that hard, right? But if someone maybe doesn't really understand how some of this comes up, what are some common difficulties that you've seen that we may not be aware of?
Well, again, I think the first one is if you're a younger person, definitely what can happen is an accident, and
Mm-hmm.
those are a lot. It could be any type of accident that's going to put you in a situation that is life threatening, or even to the point where you're just being kept alive by life support. And you could be
Yeah.
20 years old, and that could be happening, or you could be in a, a swimming accident and be in a coma, a young
Mm-hmm.
person, you know, 20
Right.
years old. Yeah. So that's not uncommon also. And you're right. It's not just for folks that are getting to their senior years, but this is really for everybody should have these kinds of things talked about, especially a young family.
Right.
Like should be young children, and they need the same thing.
And I guess even for folks who, best case scenario, maybe they don't have to make any really, really hard medical decisions. I'm sure some of those are just incredibly hard. But let's say if someone lives, kind of has a peaceful expected death. Again, I'm thinking finances, wills, like what other kinds of things are you day to day dealing with?
Well, I think, and those are the things that a person definitely needs, even at a younger age. What is
Sure.
your wishes if something does happen to you. Yeah, some people, of course, you look in life insurance and those kinds of things, but yeah, those are the things you need. As again, as we grow older, it's more, just having your financials taken care of. What's going to
Hmm.
happen with that, and again, you know what is it that you want to have happen with all your health issues, no matter what they are. And I think usually how I talk to people is you start at the place where if I'm in a situation where the doctors are saying, Robert's not going to live much longer because of this or that, my family first and foremost knows that, hey, if that's the case, I just want to go home.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
so if you think about that, when they know that, everything that the doctor talks about goes to that end question. Are we going to keep Robert alive just simply because it's going to be life support and those kinds of things, or they're right away they'll know, well, no, Robert just wants to go home, so we can make
Right.
that decision. And it seems a little
Right.
odd, but it's kind of how that works.
Well, I don't know what kind of the good next step is here, Robert. I don't know if you want to actually take us through your 5 wishes, but I guess if someone listening is they haven't really gone through this before, they don't really know where to start. I'd love to
Correct.
hear what those wishes are. And before we get too far, also, whenever we can, we could talk about hospice. What is hospice? Where do we get help? Like if someone really is just starting from ground zero, where do you start with these kinds of things?
Well, fortunately, 40 years ago, there wasn't hardly any hospices around, but today I'll guarantee you that every place you live, there'll be a hospice somewhere close that will be able to give you assistance. And so you usually your physician, the person that's taking care of you is going to say, medically, there's not much more that we're going to be able to do. And they should be discussing, the possibility of hospice and hospice is a service that a doctor would say that if the diagnosis that you have, if it goes in a normal process, you probably have about 6 months left to live. And that's when you can get hospice on board. And hospice is a lot of people kind of say, well, if I get hospice, I'm going to die. Well,
Mhm.
that's probably the case, but it's because of the disease or whatever has happened to you is causing that. It's not hospice. Hospice is just going to be a service that's going to be able to come into your home. It's going to take care of medications, all the medications that have to do with particular diagnosis that you have. They're able to have volunteers come in and help. They have assistance that way with respite care for the person, like with myself, that my wife would be able to go to church or whatever. And they have the medical equipment like beds and those kinds of things to assist. So, and of course, numerous other things, and a person can really look that up on the internet too, to really see all it can do. But I would suggest to everybody that that's a tremendous service for people that will look for.
I think for a lot of people, I don't know if this used to be the case and it changed, or I think there's just this kind of misconception that hospice is for just the last few days. Like that again, that's
Yeah.
before when my grandmother passed away, we had hospice, and my parents were surprised. They had months of care, and they did much
Correct.
more than just
Yeah.
what their perception was. So can you maybe just clear that up if people aren't really sure about that?
Absolutely. Unfortunately, okay, so this is a prime example that my children know. If I'm in a situation where I have a disease that is probably going to, take my life here on earth in 6 months, they know I want care and I want to
Mhm.
stay at home. And, and that's going to happen because they know that's what I want done. But if
Yeah,
this is what we're discussed, then the children, usually what I've seen in the past, they're gonna want to do everything medically possible for me.
right.
And that can be that sometimes doesn't turn out very well. And then hospice comes in and 2 days later I die when I could have been helped. My wife could have been helped. Everybody could have been helped for that 6 month period. And although by regulation, the physician has to say 6 months, but if there's still a decline, that can go past the 6 months.
Okay.
So I would say to people, it's better to have that months before than to have it at the end because it really doesn't help them.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So as you were talking, one thing I thought of just as you were talking is I don't really know what the planning, what the legality is. Like if let's say you have a plan and you said you don't want to be kept alive for a long time by machines or
Mhm.
whatever an individual might say. I'm sure there are cases when maybe that person might change their mind, right? If they're able to communicate and maybe their wishes change from what they told their family or what they wrote down. How does that work?
I'm assuming when you said they may change their mind, that so you have to understand that a durable power of attorney for healthcare decision making does not make a decision unless I am incapable.
Okay.
I'm not able to speak for myself.
Okay.
If I'm still able to speak for myself, then I'm going to dictate what I want done.
Okay. Gotcha.
But if I'm not, then that's when my durable power of attorney for healthcare decision maker steps in and says, here's what we're going to do. And they have the legal right to do.
Gotcha.
Okay. Does that help?
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
That,
Yeah.
that,
Yeah. That's good.
that's a great question to clear up. So if you want me to, I could go through this a little bit just to give an idea of,
Yeah. I think that'd be helpful.
And there's one in here that says, if I change my mind about if I change my mind, I can always change the document.
Oh,
So
sure. Okay.
yeah. So the example would be, at this point in my life, I don't have a DNR, which means do not resuscitate. So
Hmm.
I want to be, if I have a stroke or a heart attack, I want to be resuscitated if that's going to help. But it could be, Matt, in 10 years, I might have a particular disease that I would say, I don't want to be resuscitated. If my
Hmm.
heart fails, then that's just let it go. So,
Yeah.
and of course, my, my family all knows that. So example would be, and I'm just going to read one of these for you. It says,
Sure.
in the document, if you're close to death, if my doctor or another healthcare professional both decide that I'm likely to die within a short period of time and life support treatment would only delay the moment of my death, then I would choose the following three examples. And I can say, I want to have the life support treatments. I do not want the life support treatments. If it has been started, I want it stopped. I want the life support treatment if my doctor believes it could help, but I want my doctor to stop giving me life support treatment if it is not going to help my health condition or symptom. So
Hmm.
that's pretty simple and it's pretty straightforward. So at this point, I can pick any one of those. And so you can
Hmm.
see where it's simple for when I talk to my family and my wife, which is my durable power attorney for healthcare decision making. She knows exactly what I want. So
Hmm.
now, like I said, down the road, I can change that. Yeah,
Hmm.
because now I'd say, hey, at this moment I want life support, but if it's not helping, then I don't. But I'm not going to say stop it unless it's not going to help. So
Hmm.
and it just kind of goes through all these different things about being in a coma. If I'm in a motorcycle accident and I have severe brain damage, and that goes to the could you the younger folks, or a lot of us older have motorcycles also. But and it just goes through a lot of different scenarios like that. So it really gets you to start thinking about all these different things and and it really lends itself to have a great conversation with your family because you're reading these things
Yeah.
and everybody understands how you feel about it. One of the
Hmm.
examples that happens a lot, well, it does occur, is like the coma. There's medically induced comas, which, that's not what we're talking about here. Or there
Yeah.
could be one that your physician says, hey, this could last about 2 to 3 months. So, we're going to continue with that. But then we all know there's those times where the doctor would say, this is one of those situations that they'll never come out of this. So,
Yeah.
so you make that decision on that particular, talking about a coma. When I was doing one of the in-services on this, and I think this is what's important, we had a woman in a city that's close to Hesston that after 20 years came out of a coma and
Yeah.
had one of the persons say, well, see, I would want to do that because it could be a chance. And I'd really like to kind of go through this because I think that helps all of us. I said, well, okay, do you think that person just jumped out of bed and everything was okay? It wasn't.
Mm.
But I go further with this, Matt, because I think that's what really shows for us as believers. If that's where I was at, my family didn't know anything, then where I would end up would be in a nursing home. And I would
Yeah.
be in a nursing home for years until something came along and took my life. And so I explain it this way. So my wife would go over every day and visit. My kids would come and visit every now and then, but I never could talk to them. And the issue with
Hmm.
that is after a while, my wife it's gonna be really, really hard. You know how that would happen, to have to
Sure.
visit and then you feel guilty because you're not
Right.
there. And so again, as I can tell you as a believer, I just want to go home and I don't want to put
Yeah.
my family through that
Sure.
when doctors are pretty well certain that I'm never going to come out of this. So
Yeah.
that's the kind of conversations that happen and should
Hmm.
happen. Because how many times have you ever heard that conversation? Not
Right,
many.
right. Yep.
But it's important because that can happen. I don't go up on a ladder to my roof anymore, because one of the things I don't want to do is fall and have a serious injury, or worse yet, knock myself out and be a coma. But those are the things you can think about, talk about with your family, and it does work.
One thing I think people might have questions about too, we've actually talked about this a little bit on the podcast before in a different episode, but the whole area of wills and trusts and finances and accounts. And I guess, do you have anything that you want to offer there about, again, if people have no idea where to start, or what do we need to know about that whole side of things?
Well, so different. You really need to go to your attorney to handle all those things. And of course, they're going to give you probably a questionnaire about what you need, but that's one of those legal issues that need to be conducted by an attorney. But that's very simple to do. You just a lot of people have an attorney that they trust, or you can ask somebody who they might have used, and it's and also that's another thing that really makes you sleep well at night once you have all those
Mhm.
things done. So when you have all
Yeah.
these done, then you've done everything you can as a father or a mother or whatever. But the greatest gift, as you said, Matt, is to your children, because all they have to do
Mhm.
then is be children, and they just have to be at your
Yeah.
bedside, and and that's a gift.
Mhm.
Happened for us,
Yeah.
with my parents and in-laws, and never any regrets, and
Mhm.
never had any guilt, because we just carried out wishes.
Yeah. That's a huge blessing to have at least a little bit of peace in the midst of that, right?
Absolutely. A lot of peace. Yeah.
On the topic of wills and trusts, I don't know if you can speak into this or not, but I think there's just a lot of kind of rumors and misconceptions out in the world about that whole side of things. I have no idea. So I've heard things
Okay.
like, if you don't have something signed by an attorney, if you just have like a handwritten note in your basement somewhere, people say, oh, well, the state can still take whatever they want, or they can just, is any of that true? Or have you ever come across things like that?
Well, yeah, I mean, you hear stories. I want to make clear I'm not an attorney, so I can't really give
Sure, sure.
legal advice, but it's, there can be some things you can do, and it can be contested. I'm sure I've heard those stories. So it's just best to go to that attorney and say, okay, I just
Yeah.
want to get these things in order, and they know how to do that.
Mhm.
And my children have all done that, and they're not. I mean, they're in their 30s and
Mhm.
40s, and so it's never, you're never too young or old to, especially if you have a family. I mean, for sure,
Sure.
to have
Yeah,
that era. And
definitely.
and it would suggest, there's a lot of people when I was doing in services that would say they have a will, and the only
Mhm.
issue, wills are okay, but they can be contested. So example would be,
Mhm.
I could have it a will. You can't put every detail of what could happen with your health in a will,
Right.
and that's why you need that live person that's your
Mhm.
decision maker. But so one of the children could say, well, this is what dad wanted. That's how I interpret the will. And another child could come
Right.
in, well, that, I don't think that's what he meant. So you can see that that's
Mhm.
exactly why the healthcare decision maker is so important,
Yeah.
because what they say, a doctor will do. Just like an
Big
attorney will carry out all your wishes with your accounts and all those things.
Robert, one thing I guess I'd like to hear more about. So you obviously this is a huge part of your life. You're retired now, but I know that in this season of your life, you're involved with your church. I know this is still something that you're really passionate about. So can you tell us, how are you continuing to do this? What does it look like at your church? I'd love to hear just kind of your current state on things and your current story.
Yeah, well, simply again, I do individual conversations with children. Some folks just recently had one of their sons coming from California, so they were all able to get together, and we just kind of go over all these things that would be helpful for them, and they could ask questions, and then they would actually carry it out. But yeah, I've met with a lot of folks with their children and their parents, and in those types of meetings, I'm not afraid of just really talking about what needs to be talked about. So, and most people really appreciate that. It's just a kind of that third party helps, because I know what needs to be talked about, and So we're doing that. We're doing some group type things. People, we'll have like a meeting some Sunday afternoon, and we'll have a particular topic we're working on, and so everybody can kind of hear about it. And then if somebody needs to have more individual counseling with that, we'll do that.
That's
And
great.
then, and I'm also doing at our local senior center. Of course, they knew my experience, and so when someone comes in and needs some assistance with any kind of issues with Medicare or Medicaid or services that we have here in Harvey County, then we're able to connect them with those services.
Good.
So I'm blessed. I'm really thankful that I'm able to kind of continue this mission.
Yeah. That's great. And it's so needed because I think, like we've said, like you just don't know what you don't know. You don't know what you need till you get there. Like, I think it's very helpful to have a guide to help you through some of these things. Which on that, one of the last questions I had for you is, again, we have a lot of pastors and church leaders listening. What can we do as pastors and church leaders? How can we help people do this? I mean, pastors are busy. They don't have time to know all the expertise that you have. But how, on a practical level, how can we help?
Well, I think in most areas, there are going to be some sort of senior services. Like I said, back when I first started this 40 years ago, there were any services for anyone. And today we just have a menu of services to help people. So I would contact that particular service first and see what they can offer and go from there. I mean, that will be the first help, because there should be those services all through the United States.
And is that as simple as just Googling hospice or senior services?
Yeah.
Or what?
Well,
Okay.
you can Google the hospice services, but then you could also Google the senior services,
Okay.
and there should be someone in the area that would have information on what could help a person.
Okay, and I guess maybe one of my last questions is anything else we haven't covered yet, as far as like what else do you want every parent and every child listening? Closing, kind of as we wrap up here, what else have we talked about that parents and children need to know?
Well, Matt, just as we've talked about, I just can't emphasize enough that it's very difficult to have this discussion. Children don't want to ever think about their parents dying, and
Yeah.
parents just don't want to feel that they want to talk about this with their children, although their children may want to talk about it. But there again, when you could have that discussion, but I have to tell you, through most of my career, I was, as you can understand, when you get federal money and those kinds of things, you really can't talk about faith. And
right.
and it's so refreshing today to be able to talk about things that say, well, you have your faith in the Lord, and you know where you're going, and so when you can really have that discussion, then all this other, everything just kind of comes into place then, because now you're taking care of making sure that your parents are in pain. Because one of the things in the 5 wishes, it says, and you might think that's kind of a strange question, but how much pain do I want to be in? Do I want to be in a little bit more pain so I can talk to my grandchildren, or do I just want to just not have pain at all and not really be able to talk to anyone? But that's your choice.
Yeah.
Everybody's choice. It's if anything happens today, I just hope people can start to think about this. I hope parents start to think about this, that it's so important. My wife and I have our funerals planned, and you might think that's strange, but when you think about, you were talking about, Matt, all of a sudden your parent dies, and then what do you do? And if everything's done for them, you don't have to do anything. And my in-laws, that was all taken care of. It really is a blessing.
And, speaking of that, like I help out with our funeral services at our church sometimes. And it's also just, it's nice to know that we've had a handful of those situations too, where the person planned their own funeral. And there's just kind of a nice little bow at the end of the service when you know that it was exactly what they wanted, right?
Absolutely.
It's also just, it's just encouraging for the people who attend or the people who are in that person's life to know it was exactly how they wanted it.
Absolutely.
And that also just brings a little bit of peace and joy, I think, in the midst of what can be a really hard situation.
You're absolutely correct. all this is so amazing. And I guess that's the passion why I want to continue to do this, is because I've seen the dark side of all this, and I just don't believe that has to happen.
Yeah.
And it just has to be a conversation. So I hope people will consider, pray about it, and take care of things.
And even just maybe it might be kind of an awkward or difficult conversation, and it might take a while to gather whatever you need to gather, but totally worth it, right? To give yourself and your family peace and comfort, peace of mind. Very important things to do. So,
Absolutely.
Robert, today's conversation has been really great. I'm grateful for your career, but also I love that you're continuing to do this, that it's just part of your heart, part of your ministry to help families deal with these things. So thank you for that. Thank you for being with us today. It's been great getting to know you. Any last thoughts before we close out today?
Well, I just want people to have peace, and
Yes.
you can enjoy that ever in a lot of different ways, and this is one of them.
Well, thank you, Robert. Grateful for your time today.
Is your church looking for an intern? Join the Leadership Pipeline, which identifies, invests, and empowers leaders for vocational ministry in partnership with USMB. We will help connect you with potential candidates, prepare you for your internship experience, and provide guidance and training for your mentors and interns. For more information, visit www.leaderpipeline.net.
Well, I'm so grateful to Robert for sharing all of his wisdom with us today, all that great information that is helpful to all of us. And I just encourage you again, as a child, as a parent, as a church leader, these things are so important. So do the hard work, maybe have some awkward conversations now, so that you and your family can be at peace and experience some joy, even in the midst of some of the hard days that might be ahead if you're facing some health issues. So very important conversation, and I'm so grateful for people like Robert who can guide us through it. Okay, well, if you're listening to this as it's being released, it's right in the heart of grad season, into school, summer's kicking off. It's a fun time, but it can also be a stressful time. So I hope that you and your family, your church are doing well. Enjoy the craziness, and I look forward to sharing a new episode with you soon. So we'll look forward to seeing you next time here on Lead Pods.
Thanks for listening to Lead Pods. Make sure you don't miss an episode by subscribing to our show wherever you're listening today. Learn more by visiting usmb.org, and be sure to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. We'll see you next time as we learn more practical tools to increase our impact together.